This main event between Topuria and Holloway may be one of the biggest, most anticipated matchups of the year, and I can't wait to watch this card as a whole. This card is stacked from top to bottom, and I'm going to be doing a full card, last minute prediction and breakdown of each fight on the card. There were actually a few last minute additions and changes to the card itself, and I'll be starting with the prelims and working my way all the way to the main event itself. So without further delay, let's jump into the first fight of the card, which is Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Leal. I'm going to go with Rinat Fakhretdinov here. I went and had a look into Leal's fights, and when I compare him to someone like Rinat Fakhretdinov, this just looks like a terrible matchup for him. If Rinat takes him down early in the first round, I can see him getting a win by the second or third round of this fight via TKO or sub, and if he decides to stand with him at the start and uses wrestling later on, most likely he'll win by decision in my opinion. Rinat's pretty solid on the feet. His grappling is just too strong for a lot of people in the division currently, and just look what Rinat did to Brian Battle. He literally grapple controlled him for 14 out of 15 minutes of that fight. This was a pretty quick pick, guys. I like Rinat Fakhretdinov here, and that's who I'm going with. We're moving on to the next fight of the card, which is Ismail Naurdiev versus Bruno Silva. I'll be rocking with Bruno Silva in this one, guys. I think he's got some pretty solid stand-up and some decent wrestling. I also think that he didn't look too bad in his fights with Ferreira and Shara Magomedov, and this was when he was battling with them on the feet, and I definitely don't think Ismail is anywhere near their level in that area. I also think that Bruno will be very physically imposing, and this is in regards to him wanting to pressure Ismail and initiate the close range battles. He's a decent grappler as well, like I mentioned, and I do favor him in the grappling, especially to get top position over Ismail if he does manage to secure the takedown. Ismail Naurdiev is very quick though, and I do believe that might cause a bit of an issue, and I have given him that slight speed advantage in this fight, but this fight is close, and with all said and done, I'm edging it to Bruno Silva. Moving on to the next fight of the card, Farid Basharat versus Victor Hugo. I think I'm going to go with Farid Basharat. He's pretty much better almost everywhere compared to Victor Hugo. I am picking him to win this fight, most likely by early round submission win, just because I see his level of grappling being really effective against Victor Hugo in this fight. His fight against Taylor Lapulus really showed me his consistency on taking down and keeping someone down, who I rate having pretty high level takedown defense as well. And I do think Victor is somewhat dangerous on the feet if given the opportunity, but I do think that Basharat will be a bit too smart, a bit too technical, and he'll grapple with him from the get-go and get the early submission win. We move on up the card. Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Chris Barnett. I'm going to go with Kennedy Nzechukwu in this one, guys. You would think a lot of people are siding with Kennedy Nzechukwu, as they should as well, since he's been active, unlike Chris Barnett, who's been out for over 2 years. But Chris Barnett actually has 30% on Tapology in this fight, voted by the community, and I think that's just because he's a bit of a fan favorite, a bit of a funny personality to watch in the octagon. Nzechukwu is a heavy favorite, minus 500, and I agree with that 100%. I'll be going with him to win this fight. I don't like a loss to Martin Bidet, and his last win over Jay Collier isn't super impressive to me personally. I've seen Jay Collier lose to so many other fighters before. Kennedy Nzechukwu gets this one done, but if Chris Barnett wins by spinning wheel kick KO, I'll never doubt the man again. We move on. Abus Magomedov versus Bruno Ferreira. This is pretty much a 50-50 going in. Both guys like to start somewhat fast and make their fights a firefight from the get-go. I think most likely the outcome in this fight will be a first round finish for someone. I definitely don't think this goes past 2 rounds. I actually really like Bruno Ferreira, and I had been hyping this guy up for a while around my friends and saying how he always hunts for the finish, and he seems to have pretty big power. He is the underdog in this fight, but half of my picks on this card, spoiler alert, will be underdogs, guys. But the thing is, I think Abus is actually extremely technical, and he's very dangerous in the striking, especially in that first round, but he does just gas out after that first round. I'm pretty sure most people's first time seeing him was when he was versing Sean Strickland, and Sean finished him in the second round. And I'll just say this, I'm very worried for Bruno Ferreira going into this one. It could go either way, but if they both start to gas out, and they've been going at it, and there isn't a finish, I think I can see Bruno finding the way to a finish more than Abus in the later rounds. He has way more finishing potential in my opinion, and he just seems to hunt for it more. Bruno Ferreira is my pick, most likely by first or second round KO, by the way. Next fight on the card, Mateusz Rebecki versus Myktybek Oralbai. I'm going with Myktybek Oralbai, guys. Even though Rebecki was on a long fight streak until his last loss, I didn't rate him super highly, and I'll be honest, I can just tell by watching Oralbai that he is a proper prospect that could be ranked decently in the division. His stand-up and his pressure are great, and I can see him deciding to grapple early with Rebecki and take him down and wear him down early. If he does that, I can see him securing a win via submission or second or third round finish due to wearing down Rebecki and slowing him down and gassing him out. I think he will just be better in every facet of the game, I'll be honest. I just don't think that Rebecki has enough for him in this fight. I do think that Rebecki is most dangerous in the stand-up and in the first round. If Myktybek or Rebecki gets past the first round, I'm pretty confident with my pick, guys. We are moving on. Geoff Neal versus Rafael dos Anjos. I'll be going with Geoff Neal in this fight. When I saw this fight was announced, I thought, wow, this is going to be a crazy fight, but it's a relatively good matchup for Geoff Neal. I thought Geoff Neal would most likely get a finish as well, and I still believe that right now. I think he will get a later rounds TKO most likely. If not, a lot of damage will be put on Rafael dos Anjos until Neal wins by decision. I think Geoff Neal's boxing is still top level for the division, and I don't envision dos Anjos getting Neal to the ground with his grappling. Geoff Neal's very physically imposing. I think he'll be able to outmuscle dos Anjos in many different grappling situations in the clinch. Dos Anjos deserves a lot of praise for fighting anybody anytime. He's definitely a BMF in my opinion, but I don't think this fight goes well for him, guys. That's my pick. We're moving on to Ibo Aslan versus Rafael Sequeira. Background on both of these fighters, guys, is that this is Rafael Sequeira's UFC debut, but he has been knocking out almost everyone on the regional scene. Nasty KOs, and not just to the head, great kicks to the body, and great body work in his fights as far as what I've seen. On the other side, we have Ibo Aslan, who had a fight on the Contender Series and fought Anton Tokaj as well in the UFC in a scrap. Definitely decently solid on the feet, but I don't think he is as skilled as Rafael Sequeira on the feet. And I also think he seems to be very hittable. So that means he just doesn't have the best striking defense in my opinion. For those reasons in particular, I'm going to be siding with the UFC debuter, Rafael Sequeira, to get this one done. Maybe by round 1 or 2 KO. Seems like he could potentially be a decent prospect too for the division. So look out for him, guys. We'll see how he goes in this fight. We move on to the main card. Shara Magomedov versus Armen Petrosyan. Listen, guys, if you don't know my opinions on Shara Magomedov already, I'll say them again. He's very overrated in my opinion as a full MMA fighter, and I've been waiting for some higher level of competition to fight him, to test him out, and I don't think Armen Petrosyan is that guy at this current time. I think that a guy like Bo Nickel, who called out Shara Magomedov after his fight against Tricoli, would beat him eventually. I think Bo Nickel would beat him almost certainly, but this fight card is not the one, and I just think there's too much of a level difference in their stand-up games, and Armen might not be a high enough level grappler to dominate Shara Magomedov. I do think he'll get to the point where he versus a grappler and loses, but I think he'll get to keep his undefeated record another day, guys. For those reasons, I'm going to go with Shara Magomedov to win this fight. We're moving on. Lerone Murphy versus Dan Ige. This is actually a close one, and I've doubted Lerone Murphy once before, and he ended up proving me wrong and beating Edson Barbosa, so I think I will be going to trust him to get this one done. I think he's got a good fighting style to beat Dan Ige, and Ige's very tough to finish, so he most likely wins this one by decision in my mind. Lerone Murphy is quite cautious. He's willing to pick his shots, choose his shots from range, use his kicks, and he also isn't afraid to mix in some grappling himself if it does get to that, and close the distance, have a close range battle, and clinch in some situations. If Lerone Murphy relied on his explosiveness more and was similar to a fighter like Andre Fili, I could see definitely Ige picking up a win here. I think Ige will struggle to really get into this fight most likely, and like I mentioned earlier, I see one of two outcomes happening here. The first one is that Lerone Murphy secures a technical win via decision, and the second one would be that Dan Ige catches him and puts him away, which I don't really see happening since he's not really the reckless type of fighter. So that's really my pick, guys. That's my justification. We move on up the card. Magomed Ankalaev versus Aleksandar Rakic. I don't care what anyone says. This is such a 50-50 fight. It's not even funny. The odds makers have Ankalaev as almost a 4-1 favorite, and that's just ridiculous in my opinion. Rakic is amazingly technical, and in my opinion, it was almost scary and strange how Yuri was able to walk through all that punishment in his fight with Rakic and finish him in that fight. I don't think Ankalaev is anywhere as durable as Yuri, and I think it's been showcased in his fight with Jan Blachowicz that he really does feel the damage he takes, especially the lower leg kick damage to the calves, and he did have so much success against Yuri until the finish because of the leg kicks. And Ankalaev put on a pretty solid performance against Blachowicz as well, even while hurt to the legs, especially in the later rounds of that fight with his wrestling. This is a 3-round fight, guys, so that changes things, you know? Oh man, like, if I have to really think about a lot here, it's that Ankalaev will most likely have the slight speed advantage in this fight, and I do think that he won't have too many issues with Rakic's hands since he usually is a bit more patient than a fighter like Yuri when closing the distance. He most likely just has to be concerned about the leg kicks of Rakic and potentially smothering him when he closes the distance. Ankalaev is no stranger to holding someone against the cage and kneeing the thigh and trying to get the takedown to secure some rounds, so that's in his favor in this fight, as well as just having the grappling advantage in general. I think I'm slightly leaning towards Ankalaev in this fight, but the odds on Rakic are crazy, man. Definitely shouldn't look like that. I'll be locking in Magomed Ankalaev to win this fight, but wouldn't be surprised if Rakic won by decision either. That's my pick, and we move on to the co-main event of the card. Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. Guys, I said it in the original lead up to this fight when it first got announced, and I said it many times after Robert Whittaker knocked out Ikram Aliskerov when he was the replacement for Khamzat Chimaev. I'm gonna go with Bobby Knuckles to get this one done and to either win via decision or later rounds TKO. I think the majority of people are gonna go with Khamzat, and I can see that he is a pretty decent favorite going into this fight against Whittaker, but in my opinion, he just doesn't have the striking of Whittaker, and I think if Whittaker does weather the storm early, and by that I mean the super explosive version of Khamzat Chimaev in the first round, I think that he'll start to take over rather fast, maybe even from the second round onwards. I also think if Usman was able to do enough, in my opinion, to possibly get the last 2 rounds against Chimaev just in the stand-up, I can only imagine what the Reaper will do to you in that department. And people seem to forget, Whittaker has versed many high-level wrestlers in his career, and he's got really great takedown defense and offensive wrestling himself. I'm locking in the underdog and my fellow Aussie boy Robert Whittaker to get this one done. Moving on to the main event, Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. I can't have me boy lose in this fight. I don't know what I'll do with myself if Rob and Max both lose in the same night. And it's not to say I hate Topuria, guys. I actually like his fighting style a lot and the dude seems cool to me, but Max got me into this sport and it would be great to see him win this. In saying this, the more important thing is, who do I think wins this fight? That's the real question. If I went by my normal research and my normal thought process in picking, I'd tell you that Ilia has got more ways of winning this fight than Max. He will be the better grappler, and most likely he will have the better counter shots going into this fight as well, which will be extremely worrying for Max. He also has the power and speed advantage on his side, I feel, and his power is great in both hands. But, guys, I think this fight is going to be a close one, and I think that Max does have the tools to do some damage to Ilia. I also think that people think he's just going to go out there, rock into the octagon, and put Max to sleep, when the man has never been knocked out. It's just disrespectful to think about, it's disrespectful to say, and to list some disadvantages of Ilia Topuria's game. I personally think Ilia doesn't really have a dominating jab, and it isn't talked about enough. He gets out jabbed in his fights. I think Max will most likely have the better jab in this fight, and he will also have the better kicks, both high kicks to the head and spinning kicks to the body. Ilia is very hittable. That's another thing people don't really talk about. You just don't notice it because he's eating a lot of these shots without wobbling. He's very durable, but he takes a lot of damage, a lot of jabs and kicks to the body, head and legs. I think that will be the key for Max in this fight. Staying moving, don't be stationary for too long, piece him up from the outside, and try to get into the later rounds of the fight where Ilia will get less and less dangerous in my opinion. You want my pick for this fight, guys? My odds would be slightly skewed towards Ilia Topuria personally, but I'll be going with the Blessed Express to get this one done. I just hate how everyone is picking against Max, and I really do see some avenues to victory, and I hope to will this win into existence, or else I'll be very sad. The brain says Topuria, but the heart says Max Holloway, and we are gonna go heart all the way, baby. That's it for my prediction video, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are about the card and going into this weekend. I'm really pumped. I'm gonna go with a few underdog picks. Both Max and Robert Whittaker are underdogs in the main and co-main events, so if they won, this would be great for the channel predictions. Anyways, guys, if you liked the video, leave a like or a comment and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.